Lexi was informing the secretary that she would receive a ranking update at the end of the month. To secure her ranking, Lexi needed to complete a level C dungeon or a level challenge. One of the association staff suggested she choose a test that she would automatically receive and wished her good luck. Shin was watching from the sidelines, listening carefully while pretending to look at his phone. As she left the building, Lexi thought it would be better to request a portal online because crowds intimidated her, but she decided to attend in person to ensure she wouldn't risk being downgraded. She recalled her past failures in going to the portal and hoped it wouldn't happen again. A message about the availability of a training portal arrived almost immediately. Lexi thought she would have to wait a few days until a dungeon and a partner were found. Therefore, she quickly sent her approval to participate so as not to miss the opportunity. Although new portals opened almost every day, each new portal still attracted a crowd of onlookers. Lexi prepared herself with battle gear and steeled herself mentally for success. At the portal, she met Shin, who called out to her as she was still mentally adjusting at the portal entrance. Shin mentioned his name and introduced himself as a support hunter who would assist Lexi in the mission. She suddenly bowed and thanked him for agreeing to go with her. Shin apologized for his tardiness and offered to begin the journey. In the memories acquired from the system, Lexi's ranking was downgraded to rank C due to her continuous failures in qualification tests, but thanks to the player system, she still revealed her talent and became a goddess of archery. Fortunately, Shin knew the kind of talent Lexi would acquire in the future and would awaken it in the portal, as this did not require participation in the system. On the other side of the portal, the heroes encountered a goblin patrol scouting the area. Lexi peeked from behind the bushes and checked the direction the enemies were heading. She felt relieved realizing the goblins were taking a different path away from the heroes. She looked at her hand and thanked herself for the successful purchase. She bought a bracelet that tracked mana changes in close proximity to the wearer. Lexi remembered she forgot to talk to her partner about the dungeon conditions. She explained that she would go alone and wanted to kill the enemies herself for practice. She promised to give all the loot as compensation and pay for the time spent, but Shin was not interested in the dungeon loot. He asked her not to worry about it. Lexi thanked her partner for understanding and stood up to begin the training. She took her first arrow from the quiver and drew her bow, aiming at the goblin. She was very focused and decided not to rush and chose the right moment to strike. Finally, Lexi released the bowstring, and the arrow flew towards the enemy at high speed. The projectile flew so fast that the goblin's reaction wasn't enough to dodge the shot. Moments later, half of the monster's head was destroyed by the powerful archer's attack. However, the remaining goblins stayed alert. The arrow flew past them, and the green-skinned bandit started searching for the source of the threat. Without wasting time, she sent the next projectile, but this time her hand shook and her shot missed. She failed to kill even one enemy. Shin noticed that Lexi's destructive power far exceeded the first rank, but with accuracy like this, her skills were useless as she couldn't reach close range. Almost hitting one of the 3 arrows and noticing this quietly, he killed the remaining 4 enemies in 2 shots, primarily because the arrows were almost depleted. However, the archer wasn't allowed to focus on the shot because a sudden sound came from the forest. One of the goblins used a horn to call for help. Lexi was confused. She didn't expect that the monster could use additional equipment. In less than a minute, reinforcements arrived to assist the goblins. She started to feel nervous, sweating, and it became increasingly difficult for her to aim. The mana-detecting bracelet started vibrating intensely on her wrist, adding to the tension. Lexi realized she was surrounded, and the goblins were preparing to attack simultaneously. Her mind began racing. She didn't know whether to attack the enemy in front of her or behind her. Goblins leaped from ambush and almost attacked the hesitant girl from behind. Their path was blocked by dozens of energy blades embedded in the ground. Shin emerged from hiding in the forest and asked Lexi to help him immediately. She was astonished by the unusual abilities of a rank D creator and wondered why the hero had lied about his rank. However, Shin assured her he was honest. Because of his low rank, the barrier wouldn't last long. Finally, Lexi lost her patience and wondered what she should do. Shin turned and pointed to a group of goblins in the forest, asking Lexi to shoot in that direction with all her remaining power. The archer agreed and immediately turned, drawing her bow, and mana began to flow along the arrow. Finally, Lexi shot, and the arrow turned into a large projectile, clearing a path for the heroes. Shin took her hand and said this was not the right time to stop and ask questions. After all, the goblins wouldn't wait until the heroes finished talking, and they were already approaching. With a smile on his face, Shin began to run, pulling Lexi with him. Shin's plan went perfectly. The heroes only stopped after running several kilometers and finally arrived at the correct cave. Lexi was nearly choking. She wasn't used to such physical and mental pressure. The archer didn't understand where they had run and whether the heroes had managed to escape from the goblins. She recalled the fear she felt while fleeing quickly and how the terrifying goblins almost caught the heroes in the forest. Her thoughts were in chaos, she barely understood what had happened and how to get out of this situation. Most surprisingly, she was amazed that Shin remained entirely calm. Lexi decided it was time to finish the journey and told Shin she would definitely compensate him. However, he refused. It was still too dangerous for the heroes to leave the dungeon because the goblins would remain alert and active around the area for some time. Moreover, the heroes lost their light while fleeing, so they had to wait until the monsters left. Lexi didn't like this situation. She asked how long it would take. Shin replied that goblins usually patrolled the area for about an hour. Clearly, Lexi didn't like the possibility of being stuck in the dungeon for a long time. She fell to her knees, remembering the heroes would soon be done. Shin reinforced the story. Usually, goblins search for fleeing prey for about half an hour, but he was glad that the girl in this condition was ready to believe anything and didn't realize the deception. He hoped to explore the cave as soon as possible, which was part of Shin's plan. He could only convince the girl to enter with him and think about the plan. He was sure that Lexi would panic and flee once he mentioned the journey into the dark cave. Finally, Lexi took a breath and calmed down a bit. She began speaking with Shin, apologizing and thinking the situation was her fault. The archer nearly cried, her voice trembling. Shin couldn't even utter a few words. His breath flowed heavily as he realized that even in this low-level dungeon, he still made beginner mistakes. Lexi remembered one of her past invasions and couldn't hold it anymore, tears streaming down her face. Shin bit his finger to bring the archer back to her senses and asked her to fulfill one request. He said that since they still had plenty of time before returning, they could chat on the way while exploring the mysterious cave ahead. The girl agreed to fulfill the request, and the heroes entered the cave. On the way, Lexi asked the hero why he needed help. The hero warned that even though he had a high rank, he had almost no experience in dungeons. Shin realized that the girl had never been to a training gate and told her that this cave was always inhabited by elite monsters. For personal reasons, he wanted to kill the monster and therefore needed the help of a high-level hunter. Shin played on her emotions and said that she was the first person to agree to help him as a supporter. Lexi accepted the information in silence, clearly touched by the hero's words. Finally, the archer stopped and firmly agreed to help him with his difficult task. She recalled how, with Shin's help, they managed to escape from the goblin trap. Moreover, she knew from experience how disappointing it was not to be accepted into any team. Her bracelet began vibrating, indicating the presence of a mana source nearby. The heroes stopped, and Shin turned on his spotlight to see what was inside the cave. A large elite monster emerged from the darkness, its head almost touching the cave ceiling. Lexi immediately ran forward, asking the hero to move away from the threat while aiming her bow. The mana-infused arrow glowed bright blue as she aimed the projectile directly at the target, but the monster easily withstood the shot with its massive club. Lexi didn't expect such a reaction from the clumsy giant. For a moment, she froze with her mouth open in surprise, but she quickly regained focus and drew another arrow. As her hand began to tremble, panic slowly crept into her mind. She forced herself to shoot, as now was not the time to give up. Lexi turned away, and what she saw made her feel sick. The monster paused hesitantly and resumed its attack, swinging the club as large as the two heroes to strike them. The archer froze in fear, unable to move to save her life. Shin came to the rescue, grabbing her by the collar and suddenly tossing Lexi out of the path of the blow that would have certainly killed her. Unable to get up, the archer could only witness the horrific sight of the act of revenge. The giant struck the cave floor, causing the cave walls to tremble and clouds of dust to scatter from beneath its club. In her confusion, Lexi tried to find out where Shin was, not knowing whether he had managed to dodge the attack. This situation reminded the girl of a few years ago when she bravely entered the gate for the first time. A girl from Lexi's team accused the archer of having poor shooting skills. In addition, that teammate claimed that Lexi almost killed her with her arrow. Since then, the archer was not wanted on any team and was considered a failure by others. Team members who went with her to the first dungeon spread rumors that the girl preferred to kill her own people rather than hit monsters. Lexi's life turned into a nightmare, everyone around her avoided her, and she felt very lonely. Once again, the archer thought that she should have given up on the idea of becoming a hunter after her first failure. She was convinced that the giant had killed Shin and blamed herself for his death. However, Shin turned out to be alive and well. With his abilities, dying at the hands of a Class D monster would have been a disgrace. Shin used his cloning ability and prevented the next attack from the elite monster. Shin shouted to Lexi that she just needed to listen to him and stay calm, then they would win. Shin had prepared a surprise that would be useful in an emergency. The hero continued to ask Lexi to pay close attention and see the monster's weak spot. The girl felt her senses suddenly heighten, even though she didn't understand why. She stood up, making sure that her feelings did not deceive her. The archer's left eye glowed with a golden flame as if she were hypnotized. Now Lexi knew exactly where to target to ensure the monster was defeated with one shot. The girl drew her bow with confident hands, a stream of energy flowing from her hands to the arrow. For a moment, Lexi closed her eyes and focused only on the projectile and the target. When she opened her eyes, she was ready to defeat the monster without hesitation. Her arrow turned into a golden ball of energy and shot toward the monster at high speed. The green giant managed to turn and see where the threat was coming from. Shin held his breath, convinced he had done everything right. The monster was still able to raise its club to defend against the attack, but the stream of energy was so strong that it shattered the weapon and pierced the giant's body. Shin watched what happened with a smile, convinced that his plan had worked. The archer stared at her opponent, unable to say a word, not expecting that she had such power. The shot was so strong that it pierced the giant's hand holding the club. In the monster's body was a large hole through which another part of the cave could be seen. Finally, the giant fell on its back with a loud thud and was still. The fight was over. Lexi gasped, not having experienced such tension in a long time, and was very surprised by her ability. Shin approached the girl and said that the incident was risky, but the archer was finally able to fight with her full strength. Lexi began to ask questions one by one, wondering who Shin really was and why he acted as if he knew everything in advance and what he meant by his words about awakening talent. The hero asked the girl not to rush because they still had plenty of time to talk on the way out of the gate. The archer began to demand answers, threatening to punish him if they were not given. Suddenly, she stopped talking and froze in her place with a strange expression on her face. The girl held her head and complained softly, clearly her condition worsening. The sound of her body falling echoed throughout the cave, bouncing off the walls. Shin placed the girl on his shoulder and sighed heavily, dragging the archer out of the cave, thinking that allies sometimes really became a burden. The hero consoled himself that the day was successful and that the girl's ability had been fully revealed. Once Lexi regained consciousness, she felt embarrassed about her behavior in the cave. She apologized to Shin for doubting his sincerity as the man had saved her life twice. Shin reassured the girl, saying everything was fine and she didn't need to worry. He asked her to stop apologizing, as Lexi had been pleading for forgiveness for half an hour since she came to. Shin extended his hand and asked the girl to return the necklace that was in her pocket. Lexi reached into her pocket and tried to take out the gem, her hands still trembling from the tension she had experienced. Finally, she managed to take out the amulet and handed it to Shin. Shin examined the necklace under the sunlight and, from the change in the gem's color, understood that it had been successfully activated. It was a rare piece of equipment obtained from the burnt harpy hideout. The necklace activated the enhanced senses skill, but with the strict condition that the owner of the gem must feel strong emotions in certain situations. The amulet was activated when facing imminent death and enhanced senses were used, for example, to dodge an arrow flying toward them. After examining the stone, Shin returned it to the girl because she would still need it. Shin thought that fear was the most suitable emotion for the archer, although it turned out to be very difficult to make her feel the right emotion. Shin wanted to carry out his plan earlier, but it was difficult to find the stone in stock, even though its price was high. Craig helped the hero obtain the amulet and found it in just 2 days. While fighting the elite monster, the archer only felt her hidden potential. Lexi still has a lot to learn, so Shin gives her advice on how to act better in battle. He recommends switching her short bow for a long bow to work from a distance and practicing more against monsters to overcome her fear of enemies. Lexi listens intently to Shin's instructions and offers very useful advice, but suddenly she interrupts her speech and starts speaking shyly, asking Shin to listen to her until the end. Shin is surprised but pauses and asks Lexi to continue. Lexi first thanks Shin for saving her life and giving her a magical necklace during the battle in the cave. She was terrified but then felt the energy from the necklace, which gave her incredible strength and confidence, erasing all her fears at that moment. Lexi began to see all the weak points on the elite monster and realized where to direct her attacks. The archer feels embarrassed and says that even though her abilities are high, she is always hindered by self-doubt. However, in the short time since meeting Shin, Lexi has grown more than she did in years of trying on her own. Lexi interrupts again and says that maybe Shin is already bored with her story. But Shin reassures the archer and promises to give her his number so she can contact him if needed. Lexi is delighted, her cheeks turning red, as she rarely communicates with others, let alone makes friends. A message arrives on Shin's phone, and he quickly pulls it out of his pocket. It's from Craig, asking Shin to contact him immediately. After completing the mission in the dungeon, Shin calls the guild leader. Craig needs help from a weapons maker, although the situation is still unclear, but something dangerous is coming. Shin readily agrees to help because the guild leader has helped him a lot by finding the magical necklace for Lexi. Craig thanks Shin for his response and is glad the necklace was useful. After hanging up the phone, there's a soft knock on his office door. Craig goes to the door and invites the guest to enter. It's Lucy, who states that the association chairman has returned to the office and it's time to move on to the meeting. Craig and his assistant walk down the hall, their footsteps echoing in the guild's empty corridors. Lucy thinks about the reason for her visit to the association and reaches a disappointing conclusion, saying that the organization's chairman usually sends important instructions through messages. Lucy finds it strange that no official document has been received, suggesting that the situation is so serious that the chairman must be summoned in person. Perhaps the highest-ranked gate in the city has reopened, which only Craig and people like him can handle. But the guild leader reassures Lucy and says that Shin has already agreed to help, and if he fights with full strength as before, there's nothing to worry about. Craig thinks that he insisted on signing a contract with Shin for a reason and smiles. Lucy notices the change in her boss's mood, which has become more optimistic lately. However, she feels puzzled about how the guild leader can give unlimited support to a hunter like Shin and points out that even though hunters can be emotional, Craig is one of the most balanced and rational people she knows. It's unlikely that an experienced hunter like him is impressed by some jewelry made by a low-level weapons maker. Lucy feels the need to know more details because Craig rarely contacts Shin and even less frequently invites him to the guild in person. Finally, they arrive at the Hunter Association chairman's office. At the entrance, they are greeted by a security guard who explains the reason for Craig's solo arrival. The guild leader replies that he doesn't know the other participants in the meeting. The guard says that another guild chairman is expected to attend, and Craig must wait. The guild leader asks who the second participant in the meeting is, but the guard sees a man joining the meeting behind the heroes. The association member greets the newly arrived guild leader. Craig and Lucy turn to the familiar voice, and Jared waves at the people gathered at the guild leader's office door. In her mind, Lucy feels unhappy seeing Jared and would rather not be in the same building with him. Jared smiles broadly and says he never expected to see members of the Overkill Guild here. Jared is the only person in the country who can make Craig lose his temper. Pretending not to see well, Jared approaches Craig, bends slightly, and sarcastically asks how the supposedly unknown guild leader is doing. Craig's and Lucy's faces become darker than clouds, and they can't hold back Jared's antics, but he still doesn't relent and says that the Overkill Guild's problem is not its staff but the stupidity of its leader. Craig pushes Jared away and says there is no time for foolish provocations. Jared laughed and said that nothing was more important to the guild leader than the low-level gate he frequently visited. Even Lucy couldn't hold back any longer. She stepped forward and asked Jared to explain himself. Jared started ranting about how Craig went into the gate to kill newcomers. Lucy began to defend her leader, but Craig told her not to give in to the provocation. Craig then asked the guards to let them into the office as it was time to start the meeting. The guards opened the office door and started to announce the arrival of the guild leader, but the leader cut him off, having already heard the argument in the corridor, and asked for invitations for the guests. Lucy sat near the office door, waiting for Craig, and a security guard, feeling embarrassed, offered her a cup of tea, which she declined. The association leader began providing information to the young leaders, mentioning that a gate with an undefined rank had appeared on the outskirts of the city. Craig thought the gate was malfunctioning and discussed it with Director Jacob, but Jacob responded that the gate was so unusual that it was impossible to measure its mana level. Jared, hearing about such a dungeon for the first time, raised his eyebrows in surprise. Craig was also shocked by such a statement, noting that even a malfunctioning gate could be measured using special tools. Experts typically measure the amount of mana in a gate, so a dungeon's level usually doesn't depend on the monsters inhabiting it. The association then sent scouts to confirm the gate's level. However, in this case, they couldn't determine the dungeon's level with existing measuring equipment. After failing to measure it, the leader sent several scout teams, but none of the dozens sent returned. Jared suddenly stood up angrily and asked why no one reported this unknown gate. Jacob ignored the question and continued talking about the gate's barrier, which could disappear at any time, allowing monsters to break through, which would bring no good. The guild leaders were reminded of the consequences of similar incidents in the past. Jacob apologized for his boldness but said that refusing to participate in the operation was unacceptable. He asked everyone to forget past differences and work together for the security of the entire country. The leader wanted to contact the third guild leader for assistance, but he was abroad. Jacob gave the leaders 2 days to prepare and promised to cover all expenses and provide a large reward for those who participated in the mission. Craig asked if the teams involved would only consist of guild members. The leader replied that the situation was urgent and anyone trustworthy could join the mission. Craig smiled, knowing he would bring Shin, which would make clearing the dungeon much easier. Jared returned to his guild headquarters feeling annoyed. He threw off his jacket and ordered his subordinates to gather the best available team. He was displeased with Craig's smile during the meeting, suspecting that Craig was plotting something. Jared had always considered Master Overkill his rival and was furious at the thought of losing to him. Suddenly, he had a brilliant but dark idea and ordered his men to find a girl. Jared's assistant was frightened by the mention of the witch's name, but the leader wouldn't hear any objections and demanded Kate be recruited into their team by any means necessary. He was confident that with such an ally, he could ruin the reputation of the Overkill Guild. 2 days later, Craig's team arrived at the unknown gate. To avoid causing panic in the country, the leader limited the number of participants to the 4 most trusted individuals and, if possible, instructed them to carry out the mission discreetly. Melissa began to feel anxious because the Xinhua Guild representatives had not yet arrived. Jax assured her there was still time and asked her to calm down. Melissa nervously twirled her pistol, unable to stand the attitude of the rival guild members. She asked if a bullet to the head could teach manners. Jax quickly slapped her on the head, warning that such remarks could provoke unnecessary conflict in the field. Melissa noted that the vice leader of the guild was very strong, but such words only made Jax angrier. He asked again who she called rude and started chasing her to teach her some manners. Craig thanked Shin for agreeing to help. The leader thought Shin would refuse, but Shin explained that Craig had helped him by obtaining a rare amulet for an archer, so he wanted to return the favor. Shin also respected Craig. In fact, Shin's gratitude was the main reason for joining this cleansing mission. 5 days ago, the system gave the heroes a hidden mission that had to be completed in this gate. Completing such rare missions could provide awakeners with not only valuable equipment but also new abilities. Craig interrupted the hero's thoughts and suddenly apologized in advance for Jared's behavior. The Xinhua Guild team had just come out of the forest. The leader apologized with a smile for the delay, citing ongoing work in his guild, unlike the Overkill Guild which didn't have much work. Jared smirked and reminded Craig to go to the lower level gates again. Melissa trembled just by seeing the members of the Xinhua Guild, and Jax asked her to calm down. The girl had already started to swear, but the vice chairman covered her mouth with his large hand. The Overkill and Xinhua guilds have always competed for the top position in the country. Shin thought the media only made things worse by continuously publishing contradictory articles about which guild was more deserving of being called the best. Jared finally noticed the main hero and looked at him in surprise. He was the only member of Craig's team who was not registered. The leader of Xinhua realized that this was Overkill's guild trump card. Jared laughed out loud and tried to insult the main hero. Even the Xinhua overseer began to think that Craig was just joking and that the dungeon clearing was just a joke to him. Shin listened to Jared's lecture in silence and decided not to respond to the provocation. The tank from the Xinhua team asked the leader to calm down and not start trouble from the beginning. Moreover, a newcomer was also fighting alongside them today. A girl came out from the back row and asked to hurry up because there was still much to do. Melissa recognized the famous Valeria and was horrified by this team's lineup. This girl was the strongest element master in Korea and could use all 6 elements. Melissa was unsure if Shin could match the unique Valeria, but she hoped the Overkill Guild leader was wrong. Finally, the girl greeted her allies and suggested starting the gate clearing. According to her, it would be easy, but from future memories, Shin knew that this gate was very dangerous. In this reality, the previous clearing mission had failed. Of the 8 awakeners who entered the high-level gate, only Craig managed to get out using his skills. After that, the gate suddenly disappeared, and the rest were presumed dead behind the gate. The heroes were not faced with an ordinary cave full of monsters, but a luxurious palace with large statues that served as enemies. Jared easily destroyed the enemies with just one hand. Shin observed the battle and couldn't understand why it was so easy. A few minutes earlier, the team had entered the gate and seen the palace for the first time. Suddenly, the gate behind Jack started making strange noises, unusual for a normal gate. A second later, the large carved doors slammed shut with a loud noise, blocking the exit from the dungeon behind them. Jax tried his best to open the way, but failed. Now 3 awakeners were trying, if not to open the door, then at least to break it into pieces.